Hey guys, some stupid sketch show guy here with another video. Now this video is going to be my first prehistoric figure review of the decade. Now I asked a lot of my friends what figure I should review, and a lot of them said the same thing. The 2003 Carnegie Sinraptor. So I have now obliged. Now as per usual, we will start off with the paint job. So the paint job here is very simple, as the entire figure is covered in a tan. Now, this tan is obviously not 100% one color, as throughout most of the figure, there is slight changes and fluctuations in lightness in the tan color, as towards the front, in the face, the tan is quite light, but then towards the rest of the body, the tan is quite darker, and you can even see a couple spots on the body. That is another major detail of this figure. However, at the end of the day, besides the spots, the figure is generally one type of color with a couple of shades, and that can only get you so far. Sure, it's definitely not as boring as, say, choosing a monocolored brown, but it's nothing special either. So for that, I will give this figure overall a 6.5 out of 10 on paint job. Next up is the pose. Now, normally, most Carnegie figures are in a tripod position, which is a very huge knockback for me when it comes to Carnegie figures, as almost all of them are in tripod poses, and it really takes me out of the figure. But this time, Carnegie decided to go with a bipedal approach, having the Sinraptor's tail actually stick up rather than be touching the ground, nor have its claws be so long that it touches the ground. There's no way around it this time. This figure is a bipedal animal, and Carnegie did a great job. Now, it is true that the figure does have a bit of a leaning problem, and is tipsy and not the most stable, but at the end of the day, it still can stand, and it's very refreshing to see Carnegie actually go with a bipedal figure for once. It's definitely something that I cannot applaud them enough for, and that's why I give the pose a solid 8 out of 10. Next up is scientific accuracy. Now, this is something that I'm not an expert in, but I've asked plenty of more experienced people, and looked up a couple of sources, and the general consensus for what I found was that generally this figure is surprisingly accurate, especially considering the time it was made. Of course, there still are a few flaws with it, like the arms are a bit too long, and as well as that, the skull. The skull is generally correct, as it has most of the accurate facial features of a Sinraptor. However, it does have a few flaws, as it could be a little more rounded out rather than rectangular, but that's just being nitpicky. Overall, I'd say the figure's head is generally correct. As well as that, the rest of the body is relatively correct with the exception of the arms. It's pretty hard to mess up a body structure, and obviously Carnegie isn't gonna do that. So overall, the body is generally correct, and with a few exceptions, the figure is generally pretty accurate. I am pretty surprised, as ironically, a lot of Carnegie models do suffer from a lack of inaccuracy, especially ones from before the 2010s, but Sinraptor changes that trend, and is a decently accurate figure. So because of that, I give the scientific accuracy an 8 out of 10. And last of all, we have detail. Now, throughout this review, I have mentioned that the Sinraptor definitely has a lot of staying power when it comes to the years, and surprisingly enough, is still a relatively good figure by modern figure standards in both pose and accuracy. However, this is one of the things that the figure slips up in. Now, the detail is definitely there, and there definitely are plenty of sculpted scales and bumps and creases and all that. However, it's rather sloppy and doesn't really have any real focus. There isn't really any good alignment. It's just a bunch of details being smothered around. And there aren't really that many scales. It's mainly just a bunch of bumps, with the exception of the legs. The legs kind of have sculpted on scales and scale marks on them, but they also have a horrible seam line in the middle of the leg, which isn't really that good. But besides the scaling on the legs, most of the figure's just bumps, and that's kind of about it. And that kind of look is definitely a look that stays in the 2000s. As in the 2010s, things kind of changed with the detail, and the detail became more subtle and not nearly as sloppy and just kind of everywhere, but more smooth and aligned. But even so, the detail on this figure isn't 100% bad. Besides the seam line on the mouth detail is actually pretty good. with very nice pink gums and a sculpted-in tongue. Now, I know it's weird to emphasize that this figure has a sculpted-on tongue, but it's definitely a detail that not every figure has, and it's a very nice detail. And the paint job is honestly very nice. I do like the shade of pink they chose. It really does add to the figure. As well as that, in general, most of the facial detail is decent on its own, with the leg detail definitely being by far the best part of the detail, being the most close to being sculpted on scales. But besides that, the detail is alright, but it still is quite dated. So, for that, I give the detail a 6 out of 10. And now time for my final thoughts. The paint job is quite simple, however, it is far from horrible. The pose is very refreshing and very nice. The scientific accuracy holds up surprisingly well for being made in 2003, and the detail, while definitely not up to today's standards, isn't 100% horrible either. And so, my final rating will be a 7.25 out of 10. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down other figures in my collection that you want me to review, and see you guys next time.